arms towards the sun. You feel the warmth of the rays, and then you know you're alive, and you don't have to be afraid of anything, 'cause you know the truth, and the truth is love, yes it is. Wasn't what they said to you, or anything that you learn from a book or from the news. It's not like that, 'cause it's a thing. It is something that you do. Doop 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 doo. Doop 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 doo. Doop 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 doo. Dib on baby did long. Doop 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 doo. Doop 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 doo. Doop 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 doo. Dib on baby did love's the highest truth. Nothing could be higher than love, my friend.
Welcome to the Bassline, everyone. Dr. Kheriaty is one of the most eloquent voices in medical freedom. He paid a price for his non-compliance when he lost his job for refusing to receive COVID injections. He has been outspoken in underscoring the contradictions and absurdities of COVID policy. Always interesting, always insightful. I welcome to the Bassline, Dr. Kheriaty. Dr. Kheriaty, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm good, Jeremiah. It's good to be with you.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, I want to say to our audience, I'm back in studio. This is a live program. The previous, I don't know how many, but the previous programs, at least month or a month and a half worth of programs were pre-recorded. And we had some great guests during that period, but I do have to say it's a thrill to be back in studio. The new studio is great, although one thing that really I'm going to have to get used to, actually, hopefully we'll fix this problem, but I can't see my engineers. That kind of drives me crazy. They're in the next room. I used to have that nice glass boundary between the two of us, and we could cue each other and gesture to each other. So this is a little bit of a different feel, but great to be back in the Progressive Radio studios, the new studios, and there's so much to talk about. We have a phenomenal guest, and let's get right into this critical discussion here, Dr. Kheriaty. I would love if you could explain, for those who aren't familiar with it, the circumstances around your, I don't know what the technical term is, firing, your release. You weren't allowed to work, similar to many people, such as myself, for refusing these experimental injections. Could you just give us a quick rundown of your professional circumstances in terms of that?
Sure, yeah. Firing would be the accurate technical term for what happened to me. So I'm a physician specializing in psychiatry, and for 16 years, or 20 if you count my residency training there, I was at the University of California, Irvine, where I was a full professor in the School of Medicine, and I spent about half my time in the Department of Psychiatry doing teaching, clinical work, supervision of residents and medical students. And the other half of my time, I was the director of the medical ethics program for the hospital at the university, and I chaired the ethics committee, did ethics consultations in the hospital, and so I was also deeply involved in the institution's development of its policies, any policies that had ethical implications. I was involved in the drafting of those. And in fact, when COVID hit, I was on a committee, not just at UC Irvine, but at the University of California Office of the President, which oversees all the branch campuses, UCLA, UC San Diego, and so forth. All five that had hospitals, we had a committee that was responsible basically for devising COVID policies. And we worked on some publicly sensitive policies. You may recall early on in the pandemic, before we realized how harmful ventilation was, actually, there's a lot of worries that maybe we're going to need more ventilators than we have. And what would happen if we ran out of ventilators and the demand for ventilators outstripped the supply? How do we triage patients appropriately in a way that's fair and just and even-handed in a crisis situation like that? So we came up with a policy for scarce resource allocation. But when at the end of 2020, the university started talking about mandating the vaccines, I grew very, very concerned. It was clear to me that of all the policies that the university was devising to deal with COVID, this is going to be the most ethically controversial. And yet, strange to say, our committee that had worked on all the other COVID policies was not really consulted on that policy. It came down from on high. It was announced that, here's the draft of the policy. This is going to go into effect in a month or two. And there's not really going to be any debate or discussion about it. And that really concerned me. The universities were the first institutions to mandate vaccines. And so the University of California was set to become one of the very first places where a vaccine mandate went into effect. We hadn't yet seen the government mandates in the United States. We hadn't yet seen mandates from businesses that became commonplace a few months after that. So because at the time it was just the universities considering this, I wrote an article for the Wall Street Journal titled "University Vaccine Mandates Are Unethical." And I made the argument that they violated the principle of informed consent that is enshrined in the Nuremberg Code, which was the world's response to the horrors of the Nazi physicians and the experiments that they did on death camp prisoners. And the very first principle articulated in the Nuremberg Code is the principle of informed consent, that adults of sound mind have the right, after receiving adequate information on the risks, benefits, and alternatives of the treatment, to consent or to decline a medical intervention, to consent or decline participation in a research study. And this principle was a bulwark of medical ethics in the second half of the 20th century. It was something that I taught medical students every year in one of the early lectures in the required ethics course that I taught to all first and second year medical students. And I was very troubled that this vaccine mandate policy was basically tossing that principle overboard as though it wasn't important or as though the COVID crisis somehow made it legitimate to abandon our ethical principles. So I passed this article around at the university and tried to get a conversation going with that. And that once again fell flat. And it was made clear by the powers that be at the office of the president that there was going to be no discussion or debate about this vaccine mandate. And shortly after I published that article, the mandate went into effect. And so I got to the point then where people at the university were reaching out to me, students who were losing their place at the school, maybe losing their scholarship, not able to necessarily go to another university because, they wouldn't be able to afford it. Nurses who had worked on the front lines with me throughout the entire pandemic, we had gone to work every day when others were told to stay at home, were losing their jobs because they were declining the vaccine.
From heroes to zeros, as efficacy.
And I just thought this is not good. This is not right. And maybe it's not enough for me to just say something publicly critical of this policy. Maybe I have the duty to try to do something to actually change the policy. So I made the decision at that point to file a lawsuit in federal court challenging the university's vaccine mandate. And as you can imagine, if you want to sort of go sideways with your employer really quickly, a good way to do that is to sue them in federal court. So the university didn't take kindly to that. And as soon as they could, they put me on, they call it investigatory leave, and then a month later on unpaid suspension, and a month after that, they fired me. So they ran me through the paces of how to get rid of a professor for alleged noncompliance with the very policy that I was challenging in court. And I say alleged noncompliance because I had actually submitted 2 medical exemptions that had been signed by my physician and twice rejected by the university. And the university had also accommodated other faculty members to work remotely or to take a period of time off during the pandemic. And they didn't make those accommodations. They refused to make
Was that
those
like, do you think that was like a retribution type of thing? Were they punishing you for your outspokenness?
Yeah, it did feel like that. It did feel like it was punishment for, daring to challenge the university publicly in, obviously a very public way that I had. So that's how it went down. And I left the university. I got some support from some independent research institutes. The Ethics and Public Policy Center in D.C. supports my research on public health and public policy and ethics. And The Brownstone Institute also has given me some support since I left. Started a private practice here in California where I still live. So I continue to do much of the work that I was doing at the university. But I no longer able to teach medical students and residents. That's one thing that I have missed since losing my job at the university, is the ability to influence the next generation of physicians through teaching and supervision.
Right. Yeah, well, thank you for that great overview of what you've experienced. There's so many things that we could discuss just based on all the little details of what you mentioned. Like, for example, this glossing over of Nuremberg. I mean, how strange, those are really important principles, guys. Like, how do you just arbitrarily say, oh, no, well, it's okay to experiment on people after all. Never mind decades of legal precedent based on horrific events. Let's just kind of gloss over that and act like you're crazy if you defer back to those documents that are like really significant historical documents, things that we do not want to go backwards in regard to. But it was just amazing how headstrong they were in violating those principles. Unbelievable. And also I would comment that I had a similar experience in terms of noticing that other people who did not receive the injections but did not speak out about them were able to slide under the radar a little bit, or were welcomed back a little bit, whereas people who were outspoken just still bear that brand, that mark of dissent. But let's talk about the injections themselves. A lot has transpired since your initial resistance that you just described. I don't want to get into my extensive opinions about these injections, but they seem to have been quite a disaster from my point of view. But never mind my point of view. Yeah. I want to hear from your point of view. What are your feelings about the COVID injections from all that we have learned at this point? What are your feelings about your decision to have not received them at this point?
Yeah. So I agree. I think, unfortunately and tragically, and the scope of this tragedy is almost impossible to wrap your head around what it is that we've done with these shots. I won't call them vaccines, with these shots. I think these turned out to be the most dangerous medical product that has ever been released on such a massive scale and administered to so many people, literally billions of people around the world, in many cases multiple times over, people receiving booster injections. Initially, when I challenged the vaccine mandate, the vaccines were just being rolled out. The evidence that was reported from the early clinical trials looked positive, but of course, as I found out later, that evidence was spun up in various ways to make the products look better than they actually were. They were rushed to market. They were inadequately tested. And even a close scrutiny of the testing data showed that there were serious problems. But at the time, I was just staking out an ethical position. And I think my ethical position would be the same, even if these products had turned out to be safe and effective as advertised. I think the principle of informed consent still should have applied.
I totally agree.
So my initial argument,
that's underemphasized, I would say, too.
Yeah, my initial issue with the vaccine mandates, I think, would apply even to a product that didn't turn out to be so dangerous or so ineffective. But with that said, this product did turn out to be dangerous and ineffective. One thing that concerned me early on was the lack of data transparency. The day on which these received authorization from the FDA, the federal government was required under federal law to release the clinical trials data on which their approval decision was based. And they didn't do that. The only thing that we had was the New England Journal of Medicine article that was reporting, that these were 95% effective and that, they were safe and that there was very few side effects, et cetera. But that was cherry-picked data that was spun up in certain ways. I can get down into the weeds of the critique of that data if you like, but it may take us too far afield. But I thought, look, if people are being required to take these things against their will, they should at least they should at least know what we know. They should at least know what the FDA was shown about the clinical trials. And so I gathered a group of doctors and scientists together, and we filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the FDA saying, look, under federal law, you have to release this data to the public. The FDA knew that they had to, but they came back and tried to slow walk the data. They said, we'll give you 500 pages a month, which if you do the math would have taken literally 75 years to release data that the FDA had reviewed in 108 days. Well, fortunately, we had a good federal judge in this case, and he said, no. You have 9 months to release the data. You need to get it out there. Pfizer then the FDA and the Department of Justice lawyers representing the FDA then came back and said, we want to petition the court to allow Pfizer to redact the data before it's released, to black out portions that they don't want the public to see, which was rather astonishing. And again, unfortunately, our good judge in this case said, no, Pfizer's not going to have a hand in this. They're not going to be permitted to redact the data. And basically what that data has shown, Naomi Wolf put together an army of researchers to comb through it. But what that data has shown is that, for example, in the first 90 days after the product was released, the reported side effects were just off the charts. And this confirms what, our other surveillance methods, the VAERS system, and other vaccine safety data systems have shown, is that basically there's huge skyrocketing rates of reported adverse effects that went far beyond just the myocarditis, the cardiac issues that have been most talked about and most reported, to basically affect all the organ systems in the body, including the reproductive organs. So that was very concerning. The safety issues with these vaccines are quite serious, and they seem to be especially serious for the younger and healthier people who are at lower risk from COVID. So we never had an adequate risk-benefit analysis saying, look, how many side effects are we going to get by vaccinating people versus, just to prevent one COVID infection or prevent one COVID hospitalization, how many people are going to be injured. And when we finally got that analysis from Joseph Freeman and others who have done those studies, it basically showed you're going to injure, over 100 people for every, one infection or one hospitalization that you prevent. So, the risk-benefit ratio just never made any sense. And that information was available from the beginning if the public would have been given access to it. And they were shielded from that knowledge by not just by the pharmaceutical companies, which you would expect. It's not in their interest to have data out there that shows that their product is unsafe, but also by the FDA that was colluding with the pharmaceutical company to keep that information from the public. So that's the safety issue. On the efficacy side, the vaccines also did not fare well. The COVID shots did not fare well. Basically, whatever efficacy they may have had for some patients at preventing hospitalization or more severe symptoms lasted only a few months, 4 to 6 months for the first 2 doses of the mRNA vaccines. And so then we decided to try to booster our way out of that problem. But the third shot, the fourth shot, fifth shot, each had diminishing returns. So, your first booster shot efficacy lasted about 6 to 8 weeks. And then you take another booster shot, the efficacy lasted only a month or so. So there was no way to sort of booster shot our way out of the lack of efficacy. And in fact, once you get past that initial window where there may have been some beneficial effect, what you get is not just diminishing returns, but you get what's been called negative efficacy. You get to the point where actually people who have had more shots are not just less likely to get COVID, they're actually more likely to get COVID. And there's some hypotheses and there's some biological mechanisms that have been proposed to account for that paradoxical outcome. But basically what we see is actually the more shots you have, the more risks you've incurred of damage to your body. And also the more likely you are at this point, once you get past that initial window of efficacy, past the 6-month period, the more likely you are to get infected and reinfected with COVID. So these, long story short, these products were disastrous. I think it would have been wrong to force them on people, even if they were more safe and more effective. But I think the crime of what happened is even more egregious, given the fact that these products are unsafe and ineffective. And had we adequate data transparency and had we adequate monitoring from our public health agencies doing their job, this would have been known to the public much earlier, and a lot of damage could have been prevented.
Absolutely. Again, you raised so many excellent points. I totally agree with you in terms of there should be no right, and there shouldn't even be the notion of the right to impose medical products on any person, is my feeling. Even if you told me this is the perfect vitamin, the perfect supplement, proven 1,000,000 times over to not be harmful, proven to prolong your life, I should just simply have the right to say, well, I don't want to take it. Just like I should have the right to say, I don't want to watch the Super Bowl, or I don't want to eat a hamburger, or whatever. You should never be forced to do something you don't want to do in a free society, especially something so intimate as a medical procedure. But then, and I have to say myself, that was the basis on which I rejected the injections in the first place. I started hearing rumors of the potential harms of mRNA, lipid nanoparticles, et cetera. But I was skeptical that this stuff could be as harmful as it's proven to be. I mean, when I heard about fertility issues, I was thinking, oh, come on, how do you know that? Well, I don't know. Some folks, they knew. They'd done some research about mRNA. Almost every terrible thing that I heard about, from blood clots, infertility issues, et cetera, for increased risk of cancer, it seems to have all come to fruition, unfortunately. All these long range of terrible things. Dr. Ryan Cole calls these shots the Swiss Army knife of injury and death.
Yeah.
And let me get right now, since, this show is over a year in the works now. We've done over 1 solid year without any interruption, without rebroadcasting anything of Medical Freedom Radio. So hopefully our listeners are pretty well acquainted with our position on these matters at this point. So I would love to hear from you, just getting right into the heart of what should be the primary goals of the medical freedom movement. I'm really trying to put my list of top goals for the movement. My number one goal for me personally, and I hope other people would agree with me, is that there should be no medical mandates of any kind. Like, I don't think it's right or legal. It shouldn't be legal. It is currently legal. It shouldn't be, in my opinion, legal that you have to receive an influenza shot to go to preschool in New York City. I mean, how many children have died of influenza that you would say to someone, you don't have a say in the matter. We're imposing this on you. Same thing with college mandates. Like, various colleges have like meningitis. Is that true that there's medical requirements of various universities, right? I think all of those should be removed as far as I'm concerned.
I agree. I think we have to restore the principle of informed consent. I think that has to be the centerpiece of the medical.
Oh, and I wanted to add quickly also, Dr. Kheriaty, I think you really make a great point that's not being emphasized enough in the legal discussion in terms of foreknowledge of ineffectiveness, foreknowledge of potential harm. I think that little area right there should be the basis of legal action, because it seems like there's so many various angles you could take, but that to me seems to be very critical in terms of legal action moving forward. I'm not a lawyer, but it would appear to me that is critical.
I agree. It's really hard to take legal action given our current legal framework in the United States. It's really hard to take legal action against pharmaceutical companies or vaccines. The PrEP Act, and even prior to that, the Vaccine Injury Act, basically immunizes pharmaceutical companies against all liability for their products, which is a terrible setup for any consumer product.
Yeah.
Would you trust? Would you trust a car company that had one model of their cars? You couldn't sue them if there was a safety issue. It's like, okay, you can sue Toyota for any problem with any of their cars, but on their minivan, if there's a safety issue and your family is killed, you can't sue them. Like, who would buy Toyota's minivan? Nobody. It's just, the company's going to behave differently.
But also, and the attorney, Aaron Siri, makes such an outstanding point that I've repeated many times, where he says the chainsaw industry doesn't have liability protection. They don't claim their product is safe, and they still manage to run a healthy, profitable business without liability protection. Why do you need liability protection if you claim your product is safe? It's a contradiction in terms right there in front of everyone to see.
Siri is exactly right on that point. In fact, Aaron's a good friend. He was my attorney on the UC case, and he was the attorney that helped us file that FOIA request against the FDA. So he knows this space very well. But yeah, back to your question about the priorities for the medical freedom movement. I think, big picture, no mandates, no lockdowns. So we have to restore civil liberties, limits to what can be done under a declared state of emergency. I talk a little bit in my book, The New Abnormal, about the abuses of power that happened under the federal state of emergency and the state of emergency declared by governors in most of the states. And those things need constitutional checks and balances, judicial and legislative checks and balances, so that the executive, the president, or the governor, whoever is empowered to declare the state of emergency, doesn't accrue unwarranted extra constitutional powers. So there are legal issues that we have to address that facilitated everything that happened during COVID that still have not been addressed. Specific policies, lockdown, school closures, vaccine mandates have been rolled back in most jurisdictions, but the legal mechanisms that made them possible are still in place, just waiting for the next real or declared manufactured emergency. So that's an issue. And in the short term, I think the medical freedom movement also has to address the issue of online censorship, particularly and especially censorship that's done at the behest of the government. So I'll mention one other legal case that I'm involved in called Missouri v. Biden.
Right, very important.
Which is two states, Missouri and Louisiana, that have challenged the federal government and alleged that the federal government has been pressuring and coercing social media companies to censor. And there are 5 private plaintiffs, in addition to those 2 states, that are attached to the case. I'm one of them. My colleague Martin Koldorf and Jay Bhattacharya at Harvard and Stanford are 2 other epidemiologists and doctors that were censored during COVID, that were critics of our COVID policies. In my case, criticized the vaccine mandate policies, and advocated for transparency, data transparency with the vaccines. Jay and Martin both were strong critics of the lockdowns and school closures. They co-authored the Great Barrington Declaration, which proposed basically traditional public health measures that had been time-tested, that would not have involved locking down or closing schools as a better way to deal with COVID. And they were censored at the behest of the federal government. So online censorship is a very serious issue, because how can the medical freedom movement get our message out there? How can we explain to people what's going on if, we do a podcast and it's taken down off of the podcast streaming platforms? If you can't get your message out there, you cannot grow a movement. And if the government, in collusion with big tech, is able to completely control the flow of information online, then they have total control of the population, and dissenting from government overreach becomes virtually impossible once free speech is suppressed. And I think that's why we're seeing this globally right now, this kind of pitched battle related to free speech and online censorship, because for those in power, free speech may be an existential threat to their monopoly and to their measures of control. And without free speech, the population has no way to resist the kind of government overreach that we saw during the pandemic, the kind of overreach done at the behest of large multinational corporations that had financial interests in a particular type of COVID response. So if we don't want to live under an oligarchy where, government melded with the largest corporations in the world, a kind of corporatist rule by unelected bureaucrats and unelected CEOs. If we don't want to live under that kind of regime, we need to restore free speech. And it's especially important to restore it in the United States because the First Amendment, at least on paper, if it's defended, provides the strongest protections for free speech of any country in the world.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And, it's so scary, frankly, what's going on with this censorship stuff, because you just have legions of people who are basically educated by their own understanding. They consider themselves to be educated, maybe even university educated or beyond, who haven't wrapped their head around what's happening with censorship in this country. They haven't thought about it. It's a serious problem. I mean, I don't think most people really understand the components of what's gone on in the past couple of years. For example, and I mean, there's many examples that we could talk about with the rest of our time here, but for example, if someone goes to the internet and describes their own injury, then they get flagged as misinformation. How could I misinform you about my own immediate experience?
Exactly.
I got injected and then I had a heart attack 5 minutes later. That's a fact. That's not misinformation. Yeah. It happened to me. But it's getting flagged. It's getting taken down, getting censored. Then you have people who are brilliant professionals in their own right, credentialed people, maybe many years of experience, citations, the whole bit. And then the internet is rewritten overnight to say that they're quacks, they're lunatics, don't listen to them. So if you type in their name, you immediately see all this terrible stuff that literally didn't exist a few days ago or a week ago before they spoke out against the agenda.
That's exactly right. It's a kind of Orwellian system where history and people's biographies can be literally rewritten overnight in order to discredit their ideas. This is what totalitarian systems do. There's a political theorist named Eric Vogelin who studied the 20th century totalitarian systems, and he pointed out that the common feature of all totalitarian systems is not concentration camps or secret police, men in jackboots, barbed wire fences, mass surveillance, as horrible as all those things are. And, some of those things are already in place. Mass surveillance online is already a feature of our contemporary existence. But he said those things follow in the wake of something more fundamental in these totalitarian regimes. He said the common feature of all totalitarian systems is the prohibition of questions.
Right.
In other words, the regime monopolizes what counts as rationality, what counts as truth, what counts as the questions that you're allowed to ask. If you step outside of that and raise your hand and ask any inconvenient questions, as you do on your program here, the regime doesn't argue with you. It doesn't sit down and debate, with you. Hey, let's discuss this. Let's debate. Let's kind of find the truth, right? They simply place you outside the realm of rational conversation, right? They call you a name, and they attempt to shut you up.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing today, right? If you could put someone in a digital ghetto, and take away their ability to reach an audience, you don't need a concentration camp, right?
Yeah.
You've basically totally disempowered them through this attempt to monopolize what people are permitted to say, what questions people are permitted to ask. And so having understood this, having an interest in studying these totalitarian systems for several years, once I saw during the pandemic the same feature, the prohibition of questions. You can't raise your hand and hey, are these vaccines really safe? Hey, what do we know about them? Hey, how effective are they? Hey, what I'm seeing with my own eyes, what I'm observing with my five senses doesn't correspond to what you're telling me on TV. And then you're just told to shut up. and fall in line or obey, or we're going to fire you, or we're going to take you down, or we're going to, demonetize you and take away your ability to earn a living. This, is very clear to me. This is proto-totalitarian. This is where these systems always start, and the rest of the apparatus follows inevitably in the wake of that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you could define tyranny in a lot of different ways, but one definition is the enforcement of unjust laws.
There you go.
We have some calls already. I would love to hear from some of our callers, our astute listeners, because it's been so long since I've been in studio. That's the one thing I've missed more than anything. So we have a caller on the line, and if you would like to join our conversation, the number is 888-874-4888. 888-874-4888. We have some time left here with the brilliant Dr. Aaron Kheriaty. And before we take any calls, I would like to, first of all, announce I have a pretty big event coming up, everyone, and I'd really like your support around this. I'm going to be the keynote speaker at an event hosted by the Medical Freedom Alliance here in New York City, and the address is 122 East 83rd Street at 1:30 p.m. sharp on September 29th. September 29th, 1:30 p.m., I will be speaking at the Medical Freedom Alliance event hosted on 122 East 83rd Street. Please save that date. Please be in attendance. If you're in or around New York City, please plan on being there. If you're not in and around New York City, please try to tell someone who is in or around New York City to be there. I want this to be an historic event in its own right. I want to really give pardon the pun, a shot in the arm to the New York City medical freedom movement, because we really need to get things in gear here. We were bullied so badly, and I can hardly even recognize my city after what transpired. But before we take any calls, I would like to ask you quickly, Dr. Kheriaty, what do you view as top strategies or even tactical things? What should we implement, first of all, or what avenues are you pursuing? Of course, we have the courts, we have civil disobedience, we have independent journalism, such as this program. What are some of the things that come to your mind off the top of your head in terms of solutions and what we can do to continue to contribute to this movement?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think anything that we can do that pushes against the tendency toward centralization of power. So decentralized, grassroots, ground-up initiatives and getting creative in terms of ways of delivering medical care that are not controlled by the sort of top-down managers. We need new initiatives. There was a movement in Czechoslovakia under the communist regime back in the 1970s. The most famous individual in that movement was a guy named Václav Havel, who later became president of the Czech Republic. But there was another Václav, a guy named Václav Benda, who was part of that dissident movement as well. And he proposed this idea of what he called the parallel polis, that we have to, the institutions of civil society, whether that's in communications and media, whether that's in medicine and healthcare, education, had become so corrupted in that regime that it was really hard to know how to reform them from within. We have to make an effort. We have to make an effort to reform our public health agencies. And, maybe my friend Bobby Kennedy, if he's appointed HHS secretary in the next administration, somebody like that might be able to do something in that regard. But I think we can't bank on, getting certain people in positions of power. That may or may not happen. We need to think about creating new parallel small-scale institutions. It could be an alternative to the sort of monolithic power centers that are currently operating in society. In education, the homeschooling movement would be an example of how that worked over the last 30 years in education. Right. 30 years ago, if you were homeschooling your kids, the police would come and arrest you. It's like, this is not allowed. Mm-hmm. And there are enough people who said, no, the mainstream education system is not working for me. It's not working for my kids. I can do it better, right? And they did. And now homeschooling has become mainstream, and there's homeschooling co-ops, and there's schools, small schools started by homeschoolers. There's charter schools started by homeschoolers. And it's changed the face of education in the United States. And so I think we need something similar in media and communication. I think we need something similar in medicine. And I don't have all the answers, Jeremiah, so, what that looks like.
Sure.
New healthcare delivery models, new models of using the internet to communicate, using radio to communicate. I don't have all the answers in that regard, but I think that model of the parallel polis that Czech dissidents engaged in to try to maintain a resistance movement, until basically the regime collapsed under the weight of its own internal contradictions. Something like that has to be, how we're thinking today. And, we'll need more creative minds than mine to say, okay, well, what does that look like in terms of healthcare delivery? What does that look like in terms of, disseminating information via media and communications? But I think that idea that, we have to empower people to believe that I can do something. I can get a group of people together, and that are like-minded and start a reading group, right? And just begin educating ourselves.
Yeah.
I can get a handful of doctors together and form, something like the Wellness Company, which a few of my colleagues in the medical freedom movement have started, and we can try to deliver healthcare and educate people and self-empower people to take care of their own health in novel ways that, mainstream clinics, mainstream hospital systems are not doing right now.
Yeah. Well, I totally agree with everything you're saying. I think you're right on point. And if there is a diamond in the rough in all of this, is some really great figures have emerged in terms of who I refer to as the right docs of history. We had Dr. Ben Marble as a guest on this program. He started myfreedoctor.com. We have Dr. Andrew Zhivjets, who's opened a clinic in Florida. I forget which city in Florida, but there's a lot of creative people, great folks who are putting new models in place. And the more we can invest in those things, be aware of them, participate in them, I think you're totally right that all these sort of alternative things that can give us an alternative to these monolithic institutions, I think that's where it's at. So I think you're really on the right track with that. We have some callers on the line. I hope we still have Terry on the line. Are you there, Terry?
Yes, I'm here, waiting patiently.
Thank you so much for calling. What's on your mind?
Okay, first I'd like to say that the information supplied by your guest today and you as a rebuttal or confirmation was interesting and I feel accurate. A lot of even independent broadcasters are so busy vacillating and censoring themselves that it's almost impossible to get a direct commitment to what they're saying. So I appreciate someone who takes the weight, okay, because that's what we're coming into, an era of taking the weight for what's true.
Right.
Because truth. So my point that I had wanted to make is you were speaking about contradictions that's going on, and the other young man was speaking about censorship. Those two C's can be eradicated or at least minimized with a simple adage that I grew up with. Possibly, I'm definitely a little older than you, but we grew up under KISS, K-I-S-S, keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
Okay? Computers were initiated to complicate things. They say they make them simple, but I watched the process of them, and they give you too many choices. I mean, anything could be a right answer according to them. But if you keep it simple, stupid, you could see that if two things are always in play. The negative is always giving you the reverse of truth. Always. I don't care what they say. If they say it's day, you better look out the window because it's night.
Yeah.
Okay? And the second thing is they have banned so many books and oh my goodness. And I'm a reader from way back, so I know when things have been changed. They took those 4 years of lockdown to change every kind of book that had some vital information in it. However, what they didn't change, which they overlooked, was the dictionary. If you use your dictionary, all you have to do is look up what they are telling you. Like mandate. Mandate is not law. You don't have to do what somebody mandates. Mandate just means somebody's giving you a stern order, but an order is not a law, and you don't have to follow it. Okay? Just like virus. Viruses cannot exist outside the body. Even your normal Daniel Webster tells you that a virus is a molecular entity. It's not even a thing, it's an entity. It's a mechanism that connects the infection with the immune system. Okay, well, look it up, people. The bottom line is you can find, if they tell you something, go to your dictionary and look it up, because therein will be the truth or the untruth of what you're being told. We need to do a little more work and not depend on a false, superficial, artificial entity like the computer and the government and all these negative forces out there. Can't depend on them to tell the truth. And last but not least, the most ludicrous thing I'm hearing is what Bobby Kennedy is going to do. He supports genocide. End of story. There's nothing else he can do. Okay? And he aligns with someone who's just absolutely unimaginably insane, which is Donald Trump. Okay? And now everybody is looking to them as the dynamic duo. People, wake the freak up. That's all I got to say.
Thank you so much, Terry. You made a lot of great points. You know, it's one thing that's interesting about the whole technology thing is, for example, you could say you can download an app onto your phone that tells you when the bus is going to show up. Well, how about just run the bus on schedule? And I don't need an app. I don't need an additional piece of technology. So there's all these things where it's like, if it's more technological, it's better. Not necessarily. Not if you just do things well the way you were supposed to do them in the first place, in a lot of cases. Right.
It's going to have to get there.
Right.
I see it change from 2 minutes coming to 22 minutes in the same breath.
Yeah, I've seen that too, unfortunately.
Okay. So we need to do our own homework and get out into the world and deal with things as real, because a computer is not even real. It's not real. It's a piece of machinery, and all this human qualities they give to it is almost like The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead can run and jump and eat. I mean, they ain't dead. I mean, like, how do you reconcile the nonsense of what they tell you with what you're seeing? I mean, if something's dead, it's not hungry. Trust me, it doesn't have blood running through its veins. So do the work. That's what let me inspire you. Everybody gets strong in their own mind, because the truth is out there and it's always available. And you don't need, I have never been on the internet in my almost 100 years. I ain't been on it, ain't missed it, still doing the do. You can survive with it. In fact, you survive better because your God-given brain.
That's amazing. They should make a movie about you, the last human being who didn't use the internet. That's brilliant.
One of the things that you saw stigmatized very early on in the pandemic was doing your own research.
Right.
Suddenly people taking initiative to learn things and to read and to go and investigate things on their own, which, you know, in a sane society would obviously be something that the authorities would want to encourage, right? Suddenly that became forbidden.
Right. They were shaming you.
You know, your role is just to shut up and do what you're told. We're going to tell you who the experts are. We're going to monopolize, you know, knowledge and rationality. And yeah, that's right. We'll leave the liquor store open, and we'll close the library, and we'll ban the books on Amazon, which also happened actually during the pandemic. We know now that there was censorship not just online, but there was censorship of books as well, and certain books that, you know, were critical of certain ideas were much harder to find, much harder to obtain and order and locate.
Wow.
So this, we have to give people a sense that they have agency and a sense that they are empowered and they're not helpless in the face of these massive social forces. There's another thing that our caller, that Terry mentioned, that I just want to comment on.
Please.
As well. She said, many of the people in media and communications, including in alternative media spaces, are self-censoring, right? They're looking over their shoulder, wondering, hey, can I say that out loud? Let me hedge here. Let me not say what I actually believe.
Right.
And nuance is fine, and saying fine if you don't know or you're still puzzling through a question. But self-censorship, biting your tongue and not saying what you actually believe, also was a widespread feature of what we saw.
Great point.
Especially during COVID. And so if people are wondering, what can I do? I'm not a radio host. I don't have a podcast. I don't have a microphone or a platform. I'm not reaching a bunch of people. But you do have influence in your circle of family, your circle of friends, in your workplace, and, the social networks around you. And I think one way that we could push back is to notice when we're self-censoring, right? Notice when we're not saying what we think because we're worried about what other people are going to think or what other people are going to say. And, it's not to say that you in every social context, you always say every thought that pops into your head, right? There is discretion and there's prudence and so forth. But I think what's happened to us over the last several years is we've been pushed so far in the direction of self-censorship that those prohibitions become internalized. Right. And just returning to the theme of totalitarianism, Hannah Arendt, who wrote about totalitarian systems in the 20th century, pointed out that once a totalitarian system becomes sufficiently elaborated and sophisticated and advanced, you no longer need secret police doing surveillance because everyone is literally surveilling everyone else all the time.
The panopticon.
You need fewer, concentration camps and barbed wire fences because people begin to internalize the ideology and the dissidents kind of die away, right? And so I think when we internalize these prohibitions, when we internalize an ideology to the point where we are self-censoring, we're kind of creating a prison for ourselves, right? And the end point of that process, the really scary end point of the process, is when the dissenting questions no longer occur to you because you become so absorbed in the ideology that people can tell you to do the most absurd things, and you obey unthinkingly. So I always like to tell people, look, don't outsource your logic, don't outsource your common sense. You may not be a scientist, you may not be a virologist or an epidemiologist, but you can spot a logical contradiction, right? You know that if the policy says when you walk into the restaurant, you have to wear a mask, but as soon as you sit down at your table in the restaurant, you can take the mask off. You don't have to know anything about infectious disease.
Doesn't make sense.
Scientifically, to know that is absurd, to know that that's crazy.
Yeah.
There is a place for expertise and there is a place for expert knowledge, but that doesn't mean that ordinary citizens should outsource their logic and their common sense and sort of turn off their rationality. So let's bring back the idea of doing your own research. That used to be called education. It was seen as a pretty universally good thing for people to do.
Right, like Jimmy Dore says, doing your own research, aka reading.
Yeah, exactly.
So we actually have Nina on the line. We're running out of time, but I'd love to hear from Nina. How are you this afternoon, Nina?
Hi, Dr. Jeremiah. And
I'm not a doctor.
But you are very knowledgeable, and I've been on this show before, and you've helped me, so you're an angel, and both you guys are warriors. So, okay, enough of that.
Thank you.
I just wanted to let you know that my experience with the 4 years of pandemic was just mind-changing and life-changing. It took my job away.
Wow.
It took my liberties away. And I think, Jeremiah, explained that to you with another doctor that you had on the program. But I haven't been able to, all the resumes that I've been given out there to go back as a paraprofessional hasn't been working. I feel like I'm on a blacklist.
Right.
Is there any kind of legal help that Dr. Aaron is working with a group of people? Because my UFT, Mr. Mildrew, he has so many layers in front of him, you can't even penetrate to even ask him for assistance on my situation. And I know there's hundreds of me like that, but they have so many layers in front of them. They claim that, there's been people who've been given their back pay, retro pay, and maybe even their jobs back.
Right.
I mean, even the school that I worked at for 15 plus years, nothing. No response, no call back, nothing. So what kind of legal help can I get?
Yeah, thank you for calling in. I'm sorry about what you've been going through. I certainly pray that you'll find your way back into employment. On the legal front, when I lost my job, there were virtually no employment attorneys willing to take cases like mine. Everyone was afraid. Everyone was falling into line and obeying the mandates and refusing to challenge them. That has changed very significantly in the last year or two. And there are many employment attorneys out there. I mean, Aaron Siri's firm, Siri and Glimstad, is just one of the firms working on these cases. You could certainly reach out to Siri and Glimstad to see, if they have attorneys that could help you there or resources on their website that could help you there. But typically you want to find an employment attorney in your own state because the employment laws vary from one state to another. But there are many now that are taking these cases. I've been involved in it as an expert witness in several employment cases where people received some degree of restitution for unjust firing due to vaccine mandates. So I don't have anyone specific necessarily to recommend to you because it probably depends on where you live.
Yeah.
But look around and ask around and find an attorney that specializes in employment law that's willing to take your case. And I think, there's a reasonable possibility that you may be able to get some help. I can't promise.
I hate to cut you off, Dr. Kheriaty.
It's going to be good, but...
Yeah, I'm sorry to cut everything off here because we're having such a great time and you're discussing something very important, but we're officially out of time. We have seconds to go here. This is Live Radio, Progressive Radio Network. So I want to thank you, Dr. Kheriaty, for joining us. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your insight and your wisdom. Thanks to Terry and Nina for calling in. Please come to my event where I'll be speaking on the 29th, 122 East 83rd Street, September 29th. We're going to be discussing legal matters on October 25th with Werner Mendenhall. So I'm looking forward to that. But thank you, Dr. Kheriaty. Thank you for listening, everyone. Everyone stay strong. Everyone have a great weekend. And the baseline will be in effect until these matters are resolved. We will be speaking up and speaking out. So everyone have a great weekend. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeremiah.
The truth is love, yes it is. Wasn't what they said to you or any